Okay, so when last we left this, I was preparing to build those three new virtual machines. One for Kali, one for Debian, for the Ubuntu server, and one for the Ubuntu desktop. I realize I made a bit of a mistake. I misstated the case in the previous video. I don't have 3 gigs of RAM committed, which would, doing the math, give me room for maybe another 5 or 6 hyper VMs at 2 gigs apiece. I have 8 gigs of RAM committed right now. I assume if I were to shut this video recording software down, that might come down a bit. But I really can't shut everything down, or I can no longer truly simulate the kind of networks that I want to build. This machine has 16 gigs of RAM in it. They would have to look at the specs. I haven't looked at the specs on a machine like this in a long time. But it might be at the limits of what it can take. The board might not take 32 gigs of RAM. So I have to be judicious about this. And I was talking about picking your kernel version for your Kali VM. The simplest way to figure out what you should choose in VMware when you're building a VM for Kali is to go look at the Kali release history website, which is right here at kali.org, Kali-Linux releases. And as you can see, Kali 2020.1 is running kernel version 5.4.0 with the XCFE desktop. Versions of Kali from the first 3 versions of Kali from last year all ran using GNOME. So they've changed. So the look and feel of Kali has changed in the last couple of years. So when I get to Kali, I'll use the Linux kernel version 5x or later, 64-bit. This is a 64-bit system. I don't really need to save myself any trouble, as it were, going with a 32-bit ISO. And I've also moved those ISOs. I put them in, there's a directory in my C drive, ISOs. Looks like this. As you can see, I've got my Kali, I've got various versions of Ubuntu, Windows, various versions of Debian, I've got CentOS, I've got some others kicking around on various other storage media. But let's start building out Ubuntu. And I'm actually going to start with the Ubuntu server because it is most different from what you've done so far. You built your Debian server with a graphical interface. You built your Debian client with a graphical interface. You built your Windows 10 client with a graphical interface. Now, if you're following the instructions in the Yellow Book, the Linux Plus guide, it specifies how to build a headless, that is to say, an installation without a GUI, which is not intended to have a screen attached to it, a headless implementation of Ubuntu 14.04. So some of those instructions will be helpful, but things have changed, so let's get rolling. I'm going to call this Ubuntu UB 18.04 SRV server, and I'm going to put my initials at the end of it. Please always do that so I know when I can know who you are just when I'm looking at the host names of your systems in the command line. And I put this in my documents directory. I'm only going to give it 20 gigs of RAM. It doesn't need anything more than that because we're not going to deploy anything really significant on it. And I am going to customize the hardware. Of course, I have to point it at the ISO, or none of this will work. And so I'm going to pick my live server ISO, click open. I'm going to look at my memory. I'm going to leave it at 2 gigs for now. Now, if I start running several of these VMs at the same time and my system starts to bog down on me, I might dial this back, give them all the bare minimum, 1 gig. My network adapter is NATed. It's going to go through the hypervisor, out to my network card, out to the cloud. Because, of course, the first thing you do with all of this stuff is update apt-get, install things like nmap, sudo if you need it, etc. Now, that's one of the other things that's going to be different with Ubuntu and Kali. You're going to set a root password, but you may not need to use that root password to give yourself sudo privilege. At least in the case of Kali, your primary user account exists in the sudo group right off the bat. So you've got some labs in this module that involve applying the sudo privilege granting process that you've used in previous modules to give yourself full control of these VMs. But you won't actually need to do that for Kali. So let's get going. Close, finish. And it's going to fire. Now, another thing to remember, if you've got these VMs tabbed here, remember, VMware is going to put a lock on all of these VMs. So if there's a VM that you want to move, say from one device to another, make sure you can't see it in the tabs in VMware Workstation in console view. Honestly, the best bet is to just shut VMware down completely, go into those directories, and if there's a .lck directory, nuke it so that there's no problem. The thing that VMware can get a little fussy sometimes about who owns any given VM. So let me fire this up. And I'm not going to worry about things like BIOS delay right now. Now, one other thing that I've showed y'all in class, the thumbnail view down here can be very useful if you're running multiple installers at the same time. And I'm going to tell it to ignore that. So, like I said in class, if you have to wait, wait productively. So it's coming up. I'm going to pause for just a second. I don't want to waste time waiting on it. Okay, and we're back at something that looks fairly familiar. You're going to make a lot of the same choices you would make in the Anaconda installer because fundamentally this is, I think, the Anaconda installer. I'm going to choose English. I'm going to choose Done. My Ethernet card is called ENS33 as usual. I've already picked up an IP address from the hypervisor. This hypervisor likes the 192.168.31/0/0/64. I'm not going to do anything fancy here. I don't need a proxy address. I'm going to use the standard mirror. I'm going to use the entire disk. Give it SDA1. I'm going to say, and so it's going to give me a swap space, some swap space, the grub partition, etc. And yes, I'm sure I want to continue. My name is Andrew Phillips. UB. Okay, now one thing that is different here. Ubuntu does not like capitalization in your host names. So whatever your host name whatever your VM name looks like, do that, but with all lowercase. 1804 SRV AMP. AMP. Notice that you can't check it. There's no show me my password option here. And I do want to install the SSH server. You just to select this option, hit the space bar, and I'm not going to import an identity. I'm done. and I've got some other options. These are snaps, various server environments that you might put up. We don't need any of these, so I'm going to go all the way down to done. And it is going to think. So I'm going to pause it again. And we're back. I paused this about 15 minutes ago to let Ubuntu do its thing. As you can see, it's worked its way through the process. It's installed the kernel. It's configured the network. It's written its FS tab, the etc.fs tab out. It has installed the OpenSSH server. It's done some apt configuration, and now it's downloading and installing security updates. I'm not going to stop that. I want to let it run its course on this, so that I have a little bit less to do when I get in at the console and do apt-get update. But the only thing I'm going to do after that is nmap myself to see what's up, and then I'm going to move on to installing the desktop. Because I can't really make two videos at the same time. I have bent my wait productively rule. Under normal circumstances, I would have started Kali and Ubuntu Desktop and Ubuntu Server, and I would be running these 3 VM builds simultaneously using this fun thumbnail bar at the bottom to help me keep track of who's at what stage of the process. If you're on the clock for somebody else, you owe it to them and to yourself to not sandbag that. Don't make a process longer than it needs to be. If you can do 3 jobs simultaneously or 3 different tasks simultaneously related to your job, do it. That means more productivity, more value. You provide more value to your client, to your employer, which means that they can provide more value to their customer. The way to think about this is not, I'm getting paid by the hour, so I'll go as slow as I can. The way to think about this is, I'm getting paid based on my value to the employer. And as I increase my value to the employer, that increases the value of this service that your employer is selling to the end customer. That means they can raise their prices, which means they can raise your salary. So be as productive as possible all the time. And in the long run, your salary will go up. And if in the long run your salary is not going, if your productivity is going up and your salary is not going up, you should think about whether or not you need to be working someplace else that is actually going to pay you what you're worth. So I'm at the reboot phase, so I'm going to pause just one more time. I want to show you the login before I end this video. Okay, a little bit of weirdness. I think I might have to go into the VM and take the ISO out before I reboot. Be right back. And we're back. So now this is all you get with an Ubuntu server. Hold on. Interesting. It gave me a login screen and then it took it back again because it's running more stuff. That may actually have been it getting into single user mode. It's trying to come all the way up to run level 5. I'm going to pause this again one more time until I'm sure it's good and done. Okay, so we're at the login screen. It finally reached the cloud init target. Okay, so the first thing I am going to do is, so it's going to tell me some things. I can update some packages. The first thing I want to do is figure out if I'm already in the sudo group. And I am. So sudo apt okay, so I am in run level 5. Different version of this, call this something, different things. I'm going to stop this now. I'm going to do apt-get update in the background. My next video, I'll build the Ubuntu desktop. Thank you for watching.